Well, call it interesting submissions, and you might not be wrong. And that was the executive director of ASA, Benjamin Boachi, sharing his thoughts on developments in the energy sector in our special edition of the IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, D.C. PM Express, special edition, the annual IMF World Bank meetings. Well, you can't forget about developments in Parliament, and that is why we tried to catch the chairman of Parliament Finance Committee, Mr. Patrick Boamah, on developments in Parliament and how that is affecting the economy and what needs to be done. Patrick Boamah, over to you as you engage on developments in Parliament and how that is affecting the economy in our special edition of PM Express Business Edition.
Honorable for your time. And the first question I will ask you is that why are you not in Parliament to safeguard your majority or minority caucus side in the House?
I'm supposed to be here representing Parliament because we are a very important institution that deals with matters that comes to the floor from the World Bank and the IMF. And that is not to say that the sittings and the issues happening in Parliament are not important. They are, but I needed to be here with a delegation to understand where we stand with regards to our relationships and with regards to the facility that we are enjoying from the bank and where Ghana seeks to be at the end of this program. It's unfortunate the happenings in the House, but I believe the leadership will deal with the issues back home.
Talking about it being unfortunate, and again, helping out with some education here, there were some initial reports that the delay could have some implications on the IMF program in terms of certain regulations or law that should have been passed to aid the board approval of our third review and all that. Help us with some education here. Were those reports accurate or not in terms of certain things that should have been passed or even laid before the House that would have helped or made our case when it comes to how we fared under this third program review, and even going to the board in possibly in the last week of this month or first week in December?
Thank you very much. The fund and the bank has been very good to us with regards to this program and the review. You know, they recently came to Ghana and gave us some good indications that we are doing very well. So we expected that on our part, some conditions ought to be met, especially with regards to some legislations. The EPA Act, the GIPC Act, which I sat through the amendments at committee, that we are preparing to even submit the report and take them through the clause by clause or the consideration stage. You understand? So if you have a partner in the bank or the fund that is playing its part, then it's also very important for us as legislators and as government to also come to the table and ensure that we navigate the process by going through all the conditions that have been set out within the fund program. That's why I said it's unfortunate, because we're doing very well, and I believe that if we should continue, close of November, we should be able to have achieved a lot of the targets that the bank expects us to do, especially in the area of reforms and legislation in Parliament. So you recall that about last week when we reconvened, the EPA bill, which is going through consideration through the Environment and Science Committee, started a very good job on the floor. And so we expected that we're going to have full closure on it, only to be hit by vacating of seats, restoration or staying of proceedings.
Joining Parliament, Synod and all the rest.
So the fund and the bank definitely will be concerned. They definitely will be concerned, and that's the most unfortunate part. And I'm appealing to the Speaker and the leadership of the House that they ought to have Ghana in their heart and every decision that they take. Being political on every matter does not help the country. We've gone through a very difficult situation where a lot of Ghanaians have lost major investment through the debt exchange program. Because of COVID, we've suffered a lot. We've gone through an IMF program. And the outlook from all the credit rating agencies are turning out to be very positive in our favor. Some of these reports will give the investor community some hedginess, in my view, and it will not be very good for our outlook.
Honorable, help us with some appreciation here, and again, 101 and some understanding. In terms of what are some of those key legislations that should have been passed in the House over last week and even this week and even going forward, that these current uncertainties could delay these regulations as well, that could have an impact even on us going to the board for our third review?
First of all, I mentioned the Ghana Investment Promotion Center bill, where the center is seeking to become an authority, to be able to have some dedicated funds outside what was in the center's mandate, where they are asking for some clear budget lines to be budgetary allocations to be made. Secondly, they are asking for some fees and charges to be levied on some companies, which I believe definitely will find its way or expression in the Fees and Charges and Miscellaneous Act of Parliament. Secondly, I also mentioned the Environmental Protection Agency bill, which is going through the consideration stage, where the Minister Ophelia Mensah Hayford, the MP from Fansman, has been very active on, with Dr. Marfo, the chair of the Environment Committee. Thirdly, some reforms in some regulations needs to be looked at, especially in the Public Financial Management Act and some legislations or regulations that came with it. So those are some of the key things that I believe ought to be done. You also know that we have a loan agreement for the Financial Sector Stabilization Fund, which my committee looked at. A report was presented, but there was some disagreement on whether a fund properly so called with a body that to administer it, or it's just a fund to be managed through the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. That's my view. Those are the kind of issues that are pending. It's a 250 million World Bank facility to help stabilize the financial sector, which went through serious turmoil during the COVID period, and also during the banking sector.
What about the vote of estimate or vote of account for the first 3 months of next year, which I got the initial understanding that they should have been laid in the House last week, and that has also delayed? What are the implications of that one as well?
Very important, because we are going through an election period. Elections are just about 6 weeks away, December 7th, God willing. And you talk about expenditure in advance of appropriation, where some amount of money is made available for the first quarter to be able to run the country or government, pending the composition or constitution of the newly elected president and also a new parliament that will be sworn in on the 7th. So those are very important constitutional roadmaps that ought to happen between now and the end of this parliament. And from what is going on, I believe there will be some delays, and it's also going to affect our financial or economic positions, because we need to, by the end of November, we ought to be able to come out with this expenditure in advance of appropriation, which is a constitutional mandate. And from the happenings on the floor, cool heads have to come together to have this see the light of day.
Honorable, what about the IMF program? You mentioned some key legislations as well that should be passed. I don't know what the communication has been given to you about even the staff working to go to the board. We're looking at the end of November, possibly. How could this delay also impact on the program in terms of they going to the board and even the timelines that they have for possible fresh disbursement to Ghana?
That's also another difficult area. But I believe that there are certain powers available to the leadership. There could be a recall of Parliament to ensure that we go through those motions to save time. Parliament are masters of their rules. We can decide to sit over the weekends and on some at long hours to ensure that some of these condition precedents are met. Because at the end of the day, if MPP should win, we want to be able to complete the program. I don't think our opponents will want to see some of these things happen. They are fighting to win the elections. But if you don't meet some of these things, how are you going to govern the country? So it's also a case for the opposition to ensure that some of these things, which are conditions for the sustainable growth of our economy, are achieved. I know some of the NDC bigwigs are in town to meet some of the I know former President Mahama is here. I know Kujetu Ablakwa is here. I know John Jinapor is here. They are seeking to come into government. But we are also seeking to continue because we believe that we went through a very tough situation and we've been able to come out of it, and we are getting positive projections from all those who doubted our growth path. So I believe that some of these things ought to be looked at from a bipartisan position.
How do we manage these challenges to ensure that we manage the investor uncertainty, which you highlighted, and the investor apprehension? Because just over the past 2 weeks, there have been some positive development for the economy that people had argued that it would have aided their recovery. Now, this uncertainty could, again, dampen that. What should we be doing, and you being holding a very important position, be doing to manage these uncertainties so that it doesn't get out of hand?
The investor will look at your conduct and give you an A grade. So it behoves on us as leaders of the country to look in our eyes or faces and tell ourselves that, look, it's Ghana first. And whatever it takes for us to be able to undertake a certain course without partisanship, the better for the country. So we as leaders of the country have to put the country's agenda and whatever we have to do to ensure that what it required of us, by ensuring that all those condition precedents, all those positive outlooks, all those legislations, all those loan agreements that the bank is seeking to help us achieve and its attendant effects positively on our economy are achieved.
Honorable, as we round up this interview, I just want to ask you one last question. In my early days here, you also took over as well. How would you rate the Finance Committee in terms of their workings in Parliament and the broader economy as a whole? There are some who have argued that in trying to play your check or your role as checking government and ensure that right expenditure is carried out and all the rest, we have failed as the committee, and not just you as well. And even when we talk about the tax reliefs, where there have been several arguments about it and all the rest, that whether in this day we should still go ahead granting exemptions to companies and all the rest. For you, how would you assess the committee's working as this Parliament gradually comes to an end?
Thank you very much. The Finance Committee is one of the few committees that are mentioned in the Constitution. So in the mind of the framers of the Constitution, the committee responsible for finance is a very important committee. I believe that we sit in the middle to ensure that we use our position as committee members to help the government achieve the objectives as laid down in the Constitution. Secondly, you spoke about tax waivers.
Yes. Controversial tax waivers.
They are not controversial. There's no country economy that doesn't grant tax waivers. Question is, are they given to companies or institutions that will help drive the growth of the country? We've gone through about 42 tax waivers, and most of them local companies, most of them involved in import substitution. I don't think anybody in this country will argue against import substitution, where most of the items that we import, we are supporting local economies or local companies to produce. No reasonable person will argue against that. Question is, are we able to monitor closely how these companies utilize the waivers that are given them?
And are we doing that, Honorable? Are we doing that?
The Customs Division of the GRA ought to be empowered. Their capacity ought to be built to be able to monitor so that our oversight job are made easy, you understand. So, for example, you talk about close to about $850 million given to MPS for the Temaport expansion. Port work is very important. It's like printing of money. Every day there is business at the port. Last week I invited GPHA to the committee to give us an idea of where we are with those tax waivers. They've utilized close to about $400 million. They told out the number of jobs that they've created. As we speak, in the area of even oil exploration, Cote d'Ivoire, Namibia, Guyana are attracting big-time exploration companies. It's because of the reliefs that they are giving those companies. Ghana is not an island. An investor that seeks to invest about $100 million in a well would want to ask him or herself, what are the advantages in me putting $100 million in a risky business like oil exploration? So all the companies that you speak to globally, investing in your economy, they will ask questions. If I'm to send my money to Guyana, if I'm to send my money to Ghana, if I'm to send my money to Cote d'Ivoire or Namibia, what do I seek to gain? They do a pros and cons analysis, and they make a determination because it's the same oil, it's the same manufacturing company that they are seeking to establish. We have an advantage because of where we are located. We have an advantage because of our stability. We have an advantage because we have a lot of serious human resource base. Because a lot of people who have gone to school, who can speak, they can write, the human resource capital is good in our part of the world. But is that all that an investor
So there's justification for these tax waivers and attracting FDIs and capital?
Absolutely. No government.
What about extending the same to local firms as well? Because the argument is that it's positioned towards foreign firms at the expense of indigenous firms.
It's not true, George. I can give you a list of the companies, but they are setting up in Ghana. They are going to be paying corporate taxes. They are going to be paying payee. They are going to be paying other levies. You understand? So those are the things that you need to ensure that they are properly collected and accounted for. As for a company, companies will always come and ask for incentives. It's for you to give them the right incentives. It's for you to ensure that whatever you are seeking from them, you collect
and these are firms that deserve it, the necessary scrutiny was done.
I believe so, because we met with the GRA, we met with Ministry of Finance officials, we met with GIPC officials, and they all will argue for the incentives that they brought before us. What we also did was to look at the setup of those companies and also to take out raw materials, which was a very huge chunk of what they were asking for. So now raw materials are not part of the incentive packages that we are giving to some of these companies. So all on equipment and machinery.
Honorable, I appreciate your time, so I know it's quite a short notice, but we'll catch up again and see how, when the meeting ends, going forward, whether some of the key targets that have been met going forward, and even looking at how we can sustain and develop the economy. So I appreciate your time, Honorable. Thank you so
very
much.
much.
And this has been our engagement at the annual meetings, engaging the Chair of Parliament Finance Committee, Honorable Patrick Boamah, on developments in Ghana, the fund program, the economy, and even the almighty tax waivers.